Hello everybody. In this video, we are going to be looking at TkInter's layouting functionalities, including grid and adding frames and combining all of those to design our blackjack game. Let's start by drawing out a sketch. That way we have a good idea of where we want our widgets to go. That's our labels, our buttons, any images, and so on. So there's my window, and let's give it a title. So within my blackjack master window, I will have three main sections. The top section will contain the dealer's actions, cards, and score. The middle section will contain the player's cards, player's score, and the bottom section will contain the buttons. So our buttons for dealing, for hitting, and for standing. In the distant past, which I hope people can still remember, we used the pack method to place items within our window. So if you remember how pack works, it's not very precise because the objects are placed kind of in a stack. They're just piled up in our window. Today, we are going to look at the grid method and how using grids can result in much cleaner layouts. Here is the sketch again, displaying how I want the blackjack game to be laid out. I should mention we are only looking at the layouts today. We are dealing with the graphics and images in the next video. Here are the individual frames outlined in red. So I am creating 3 frames within my master window. The first frame will contain a label relating to the dealer's info. The second frame will contain a label relating to the player's info. The third frame will contain the deal, hit, and stand buttons. So again, you might wonder why we need an individual frame for each label, but in this way, in future updates, we have the space to add playing cards within the appropriate frames. Let's see what this looks like in the code. Again, our focus in the video is on grid layouts, so I will not be showing everything pertaining to the blackjack program. At the end of this video, we should have a window that is nicely arranged according to our sketch, but not with the same functionality as blackjack just yet. As an exercise, you should be able to modify your own baby blackjack programs to match the layout here or even improve it. We start by defining our master window. Right, and let's give it a title. So again, I'm keeping this code in particular very minimal. If you want to follow along, I'll post a link in the description. To start out, basically, we just have our import statements, defining our class, and this bit of code at the end, right, which I haven't really touched from the beginning, right? Just make sure the file names match. And there's this extra line of code which I haven't talked about, but I've left commented out. If you want to play around with it, you got different options for window sizing. Okay, all I'm going to do right now is go through how to initialize the different widgets and things. Okay, so we have our master window, and remember, within the master window we're gonna want 3 frames: a dealer frame, player's frame, and a buttons frame. So let's do that right now. Okay, so these 3 frames go on the master window. Okay, really simple. Again, I want to use grid instead of pack to place these items in my layout. Okay, so cue the slide. So now we're back, And when we use the grid method, we want to be able to use row and column numbers as we saw in the diagram. So the dealer frame goes on top. Player's frame goes in the middle. Still column 0. And the button's frame goes last. So far, all we have are blank frames in a blank window, so there's no point running this right now. We don't have anything yet. However, within my dealer frame, I'm going to have a label for the dealer. Within my player frame, I'm going to have a label for the player. And in my buttons frame, I'm going to have the different buttons I want. So let's start by creating some of these labels. So self, label, dealer. Okay, so in the past, right, if I want a label on the master, we type in master, right? And we can just say, we can just say there. You can change that text to however you want for now. Again, this is just the layout exercise. We want to change this because now the label is not going on the master. The label is going on the frame, and then the frame is going on the master, right? So you can think of it as a frame is like a small subsection that goes on the window. I have a clip of myself. Yeah, cue that. So it helps to think of your frame as a subsection of your window, right? So a frame will have its own row and column. So again, if my buttons were to go on a frame, they would have to use the individual row and column numbers on the frame, meaning I would have to use columns 0, 1, and 2. What we actually want to do is place the label for the dealer in the dealer's frame. So I'm just going to copy and paste that here. Okay. And now let's actually place this on using grid. I should mention that it's a good idea not to mix up pack and grid in the same program. If we're going to use grid, then stick to grid. If you're going to use pack, stick to pack. My hands are not shuffling. Whatever. So I'm going to use grid. Now, the row and column numbers that I am going to use are the row and column numbers inside my frame. Is this in the camera? Okay. Not for the master window, but for the internal frame. So because it's the only thing inside the frame, it shouldn't make too much of a difference, but I'm keeping in mind I want a space for the cards. So within the dealer's frame, it's probably the second row. I'm going to save row 0 for the cards. Scrolling down. Now I want a label for the player. And we're going to start out the same way, right? The label for the player is going on the frame for the player. And I'll just throw in some generic message. And then similarly, we're going to place it on the grid in the same row, the same column. Again, these numbers are relative. When I mean row 1, column 0, that means row 1, column 0 of the player frame. Okay? Same here. When I'm placing the player's frame at row 1, column 0, that is row 1 and column 0 of the master window. Right? So it's all relative. Okay. So we're almost done here. I have the dealer's frame dealt with and the player's frame. I want to place things in my buttons frame. So let's define 3 buttons now. My deal button, my hit button, and my stand button. Okay, let's start adding comments to these. Okay, so notice my logic here, right? I've created the frames first to go on the master, and then I'm creating the widgets to go on the frames, right? So it's like I'm working back to front in terms of my layouting. So now that we've created the buttons, let's give you guys more room to see this. So again, these buttons are going on the buttons frame. Okay. Copy paste is your friend. Deal, hit, and so I have my 3 buttons, and I'm going to be placing them on my buttons frame, again using grid and using the internal row and column numbers of my buttons frame. I would have to use columns 0, 1, and 2. Let us run it to see if it works. And there it is. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you're all well. Hope you're all safe. Hopefully this answers some questions and allows us to move forward with our project. In the next videos, we will talk about how to include actual game functionality, adding the graphics and the pictures and so on. I'm going to make sure we go through it step by step, okay? It's perfectly understandable. This is a stressful time for everybody. Grade 12 is a stressful enough year without public health crises going on. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me. You have my email. You have Google Classroom. For now, take care, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.